Thank you so much for inviting me to share my thoughts on this panel. I'd like to speak about Srila Prabhupada and his women disciples in the context of the practical application of his teachings, in the context of the 50-plus years of ISKCON history, and in the context of our greater Gaudiya history. When we contemplate Srila Prabhupada's legacy and how to carry it forward into the future, we need to ask ourselves, how can we break down the barriers to help people hear, appreciate the extraordinary contributions of Srila Prabhupada and the beautiful path of bhakti as handed down by our Gaudiya predecessor acaryas? Srila Prabhupada's unprecedented compassion is rooted in the compassion, it's ringing though. Is rooted in the compassion and broad inclusive vision of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the realized acaryas following in his line. Srila Prabhupada once wrote in praise of his Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, saying that he was presenting what Srila Prabhupada called the oldest of all, but in a new dress. What extraordinary vision and compassion that both Srila Prabhupada and his Guru Maharaj exhibited to present the Gaudiya tradition authentically, but in unprecedented ways in order to engage the minds and hearts of a new generation in a new place and time, in a new cultural milieu. When we examine the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, we need to include the whole body of his teachings, the whole body of his legacy, his books, his public lectures, his actions, his personal conversations, and his letters. Some devotees in ISKCON say that only what's in Srila Prabhupada's books is important, that these other sources are secondary or less important. But both Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada teach us the importance of hearing from the person Bhagavat, as well as the book Bhagavat. Srimad Bhagavatam says, a devotee Bhagavat is as good as the book Bhagavat, because the devotee Bhagavat leads his life in terms of the book Bhagavat, and the book Bhagavat is full of information about the personality of Godhead and his pure devotees, who are also Bhagavatas. Book Bhagavata and person Bhagavata are identical. I often think that Srila Prabhupada could have shipped his trunks of Srimad Bhagavatams to the West unescorted and saved himself considerable time and trouble. He could have remained in his ecstasy in Vrindavan and not broken the traditional Vedic prohibition that a sannyasi should not cross the ocean. But out of his immense and unprecedented compassion, he broke this tradition and crossed the 7 seas to personally bring the sublime message of Lord Chaitanya to the world. In fact, there was no audience interested, qualified, or ready to hear Srimad Bhagavatam in New York City or any other city in the West. Because there was no ready audience for the book Bhagavat, Srila Prabhupada, the person Bhagavat, had to come to create an audience. He came to instill a taste and an ability to hear the wisdom of the book Bhagavat. Srila Prabhupada's inclusive vision in the way he welcomed his early followers, both young men and young women, broke all stereotypes of traditional Vedic propriety. In 1969, Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to his young disciple, Himavati Devi Dasi, about what he called a new thing in the history of the Sankirtan movement. He wrote, "Personally, I am so much gladdened that the pairs of young boys and young girls whom I have placed in householder life are doing so nicely in the Western world. When Lord Chaitanya delivered Jagai and Madhai, he was also a householder. But in this case, and in many other cases also, I find that my disciples combine together, husband and wife, as we saw last night, I have to say, so beautiful. Husband and wife are doing this preaching work so nicely. So I am especially proud how my householder disciples are preaching Lord Chaitanya's mission. This is a new thing in the history of the Sankirtan movement." In India, this is still Srila Prabhupada speaking, in India, all the acaryas and their descendants later on acted only from the men's side. Their wives were at home because that was the system from old times, that women are not required to go out. But in Bhagavad Gita, we find that women are also equally competent, like the men, in the matter of Krishna consciousness movement. Please, therefore, carry on these missionary activities and prove it by practical example that there's no bar for anyone in the matter of preaching work for Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada spoke to Himavati about the novelty of grihastha couples, husband and wife, preaching Krishna consciousness together. But there had been also a tradition from ancient times of saintly women renunciates, sometimes living in forest ashrams, although of course not as many as the men. Saintly women like Shabari or Vedavati, whom we read about in the ancient Ramayana, or Gargi, the woman sage who debated Yajnavalkya in the court of King Janaka, as described in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. During the Bhakti Renaissance of the 16th and 17th centuries, there were esteemed Vaisnavis leading and giving diksha, like Sita Thakurani, the wife of Sri Advaita Acharya, Jahnava Thakurani, the wife of Lord Nityananda, who led the entire Sankirtan movement in her time, Hemalata Thakurani, the eldest daughter of Srinivasa Acharya, Gaurangi Priya Devi, the disciple of Srinivasa Acharya, and the daughter of Raghunath Chakravarti. And of course, the famous Gangamata Goswamini, who initiated King Mukundadev, the king of Jagannath Puri, as her disciple. In addition to these most famous parishads, there were lesser-known Vaishnavi acharyas coming down in the lines of Advaita Acharya, Lord Nityananda, and Gadadhar Pandit as well. Our own great Acharya, Bhaktivinode Thakur, took diksha in the line of Gadadhar Pandit, where there were several Vaishnavi gurus. Although we generally regard him as the Siksha disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, he never rejected his own diksha line. There are also important acharyas who took diksha from Vaishnavi gurus, such as Yaginandan Acharya, the author of Karnananda, who was initiated by the daughter of Srinivasa Acharya, Hemalata Thakurani, and Nityananda Das, the author of Prema Vilas, who was the disciple of Jahnava Thakurani. Tamal Krishna Goswami wrote in his A Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti that was posthumously completed and published by Dr. Graham Schwager, Guru Das, who's here with us today. He says, Prabhupada also gave women a vital role in his mission, a role they have been able to reclaim only after many struggles. Prabhupada established women's ashrams, gave women Gayatri Mantra initiation, made them priests in his temples, and counted many of them among his best preachers. In addition to noting the many ways women contributed, Prabhupada contributed his movement's success to their magnetic presence amidst the men, nearly all of whom, he reasoned, would not have otherwise stayed. Dr. Kim Nam documented ISKCON's difficulties in reconciling traditional models with modern realities. She writes, "Some of Prabhupada's statements seem blatantly sexist, variously referring to Bhagavad Dharma, divine duties, Sri Dharma, the duty of a woman, and both Vedic Varnashram Dharma and its modern interpretation, Hindu Varnashram Dharma. Yet, he opened his movement to women." And I'm going to end that quote here, but I want to interject that just as Srila Prabhupada spoke cuttingly about materialistic men, he also spoke disparagingly about materialistic women, and how in the modern society they are so often misled by exploitative materialistic men. He also often very clearly pointed out that women on the spiritual path of bhakti are not like those materialistic men. They are Vaisnavis and meant to be given all respect as saintly persons. Dr. Nath further explains, "Needless to say, these complex levels of interpretation have led to many misunderstandings among both commentators and devotees. The need to balance a commitment to ideals and the wisdom of a spiritual tradition situated in real time and place inevitably elicits mixed messages, those spoken out of an appreciation of ideals and those framed in the experience of the hard realities." She continues, "It is commendable in the face of this tension that the founder of the Hare Krishna movement made a philosophy and practice available to women that had once been largely closed to them, allowing them effective material equality with men and the opportunity to serve in the same ways despite his own cultural background and the ideal prescriptions of his tradition. He acted in accordance with the spirit of Bhagavad Dharma, in the manner of Chaitanya, and in the specific context of Kali Yuga, as it manifested itself in the West." So that ends her quote. Again, in this Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti, that I was quoting from that. So this tension was clearly visible in Calcutta in 1972. Madhavananda Das, who was there, recounts. Srila Prabhupada was on a morning walk with a lot of brahmacharis. Some of the brahmacharis were complaining because women also lived in the Calcutta temple at 3 Albert Road. The brahmacharis said, "Srila Prabhupada, why don't the women get a place outside, separate from the brahmacharis? Their presence is not conducive to our brahmachari life." Srila Prabhupada was silent for the entire walk. Sometimes he stopped walking and then started again, but he didn't respond to the brahmacharis. Madhavananda recalls the moment when they returned from the walk with Srila Prabhupada. He says, "We came up the stairs at 3 Albert Road. Someone opened the door and there was Malati, Palika, and Kausalya, who had stayed behind to wash the floor, cook, bathe and dress the deities, and prepare Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasana for Srila Prabhupada and the guests. The women immediately offered their obeisances and said, 'Jai Srila Prabhupada.' Prabhupada turned to all of us and said, 'But if you associate with these women, you will go back to Godhead.'" And he walked off back into his room. Shruti Kirtidas shares a similar story. He was massaging mustard oil onto Prabhupada's back. He says he turned to face Srila Prabhupada and was enjoying the sweet atmosphere that surrounded him. With his eyes closed, Prabhupada spoke. "My godbrothers criticize me that I have allowed women to live in our temples. This was not done in India. This is not done in India. Only brahmacharis can live. But I have become successful because I have made this adjustment." Prabhupada opened his eyes and continued. "Although they criticize me, their Gaudiya maths are empty. The only time they have people coming is during Parikram in Mayapur during Gaur Purnima. And who is coming? Widows, women in white. But because I have made this adjustment, I was successful. In the oft-quoted conversation with Professor O'Connell, the professor asked Srila Prabhupada, is it possible, Swamiji, for a woman to be a guru in the line of disciplic succession? Srila Prabhupada said, yes. Jahnava Devi was Nityananda's wife, she became. The qualification of guru is that he must be fully cognizant of the science of Krishna. Then he or she can become guru. Ye Krishna tattva vekta se guru hai. In our material world, is it any prohibition that women cannot become professor? If she is qualified, she can become professor. That's the end of that quote. Of course, there will not be so many. Most women are more interested in family or today in other types of work. In 1972, Srila Prabhupada expressed deep gratitude to his disciple Mula Prakriti Devi Dasi for her outstanding service in distributing his books. He told her at that time that the women in Krishna consciousness are Lord Chaitanya's secret weapon for spreading his mission. My own early experience, which aligns with the experience of many of my god sisters, is that we were all serving together as a family. Srila Prabhupada called his disciples Prabhu, both the men and the women, and we all followed his example, referring to each other in the same way. We all know that Srila Prabhupada instructed his male disciples to see all women, other than one's wife, as mother, but none of us ever heard him call any woman Mataji or mother. Why mention this? Is it even important? It is important because it created an atmosphere of equal respect for all who were serving together as family in Krishna's service, a beloved community engaged in Lord Chaitanya and Prabhupada's mission. You may have heard me tell the story of when a small group of disciples were in Srila Prabhupada's upstairs back apartment behind his first storefront temple at 26 2nd Avenue in New York City. Srila Prabhupada looked at each one of us intently and said, I want each one of you to open a temple somewhere. As an impetuous 16-year-old, I asked him, even the girls, Swamiji? He smiled and said, yes, there is no difference between the boys and the girls. When you are teaching Krishna consciousness, there is no difference. Then he spoke about Jahnava Thakurani, the wife of Lord Nityananda, and how she was leading the entire Sankirtan movement after the disappearance of Lord Nityananda. In the year 2000 in Mayapur, a group of senior women disciples of Srila Prabhupada spoke to the ISKCON GBC about the decades of systemic denigration and mistreatment of women in ISKCON. Yamuna, Vishaka, Sudharma, Urmila, Sitala, Kusha, Saudamani, I was also there. We asked that women be allowed to give class, to lead kirtan, that ashrams be provided for women wherever possible. Up until that point, no woman had ever given class in Mayapur. It was decided that our brilliant and scholarly god sister Vishaka Devi would give the Srimad Bhagavatam class the next morning. The next day, when it was time for the class to begin, the microphone was gone, the sound system had been turned off, the Srimad Bhagavatam volume had gone missing, and the kartals were also gone. Bhaktitirtha Swami, although a sannyasi, stood up and adamantly demanded that the local devotees put everything in place so the class could proceed as usual. I remember him being like a firebrand circling that temple room. As we hear of Lord Chaitanya dancing at Ratha Yatra, he was emphatic that his god sisters should not be disrespected and disempowered. The missing items were then discovered, and Vishaka proceeded to give a stellar class. It's sometimes asked, why did Srila Prabhupada not invite any women to become a temple president or be on the GBC of ISKCON? In fact, Srila Prabhupada did invite both Govinda Dasi and Yamuna Devi to be on the GBC. Govinda Dasi writes, I can assure you that this is a fact. Srila Prabhupada wanted 2 female disciples on his GBC when he first formed it in late 1968. I saw the names written in his own handwriting while tidying his desk in the morning, since I was his secretary during 1967 and 1968. Secretary, 1967-68. She says, he also discussed this with Yamuna. He explained to her, children are shy. Young women are also shy. They may only talk to a woman if there are problems. Srila Prabhupada's practical wisdom can be clearly seen from this. Think of all the troubles we could have avoided by hearing his practical viewpoints and putting them into effect. This is from Govinda Dasi's upcoming book of memoirs. Dinatarani, Yamuna Devi's dear friend, also wrote, yes, Yamuna repeated her recollection of the GBC matter several times over the years. She said that Srila Prabhupada recommended that she and Govinda Dasi become GBCs. According to her, there were vehement objections to this among some male members, especially Tamal Krishna. Yamuna therefore declined. I would add, she says, that in 1993, Tamal Krishna Maharaj personally apologized to Yamuna for this in my presence. In Los Angeles in 1972, Srila Prabhupada gave initiation to Mahaguna Devi Dasi and asked her, are you Japanese? She answered yes. And he told her and her American husband, you should go back to Japan, take citizenship, and your wife can become temple president there. This is from Bond of Love interview with her. Today in North America, we have 3 women temple presidents in Canada, and 10 in the US. Some of these temples are small and some are the largest temples in North America. And they're doing an excellent job. Recently, a senior brahmachari from India was visiting the Naperville temple that's under construction in that very affluent suburb of Chicago. And he was expressing his amazement to one of our North American leaders that a woman was leading this project, constructing a major new ISKCON temple. Our local leader told him that, yes, here in the US, we give women a chance. And they're showing that they can do wonderful service. And we keep telling you this. Another beautiful new temple in Potomac, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C., has also just been completed. This project is also being led and managed by a woman, Ananda Vrindavan. It's unfortunate that in our ISKCON society, Srila Prabhupada's words become weaponized to discriminate against women. In the lexicon of Srila Prabhupada, intelligence refers, you referred to this morning, intelligence refers to the power to analyze things in their proper perspective. And knowledge means understanding what is spirit and what is matter. And this is buddhi, or analytical intelligence. Krishna also uses the word metta, a more emotional intelligence, in Bhagavad Gita 10:34, where he lists the qualities of women as fame, fortune, speech, memory, intelligence, faithfulness, and patience. Perhaps leaning into Lord Krishna's definition, today scholars observe that there are 8 or 9, or some say even 12 different types of intelligence. It's found that women are more attuned to empathy and better at multitasking or shifting from one side of the brain to the other. Traditionally, in Vedic society, women represented hearth and home, family attachment, beauty, and all things of this world. And the Shastras are mostly written by male renunciates, encouraging other male renunciates on the path of Vairagya Vidya. Therefore, historically, we see references that de-emphasize the role of women in contrast to Srila Prabhupada, who in the modern age empowered women equally in preaching and spreading his movement. But I observed at a certain time that Srila Prabhupada grew disappointed when he saw that many of his householder disciples were not able to follow the principles of Krishna consciousness and keep their vows. So in later years, Srila Prabhupada stressed renunciation and emphasized the training of sannyasis and brahmacharis. But this proved to be troublesome and came to a head when the position of women in ISKCON became a contentious issue in America and elsewhere, provoking conflict between the grihastas and the sannyasis and brahmacharis. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was at the center of this dispute as the leader of the Radha Damodar bus parties, composed entirely of brahmacharis and sannyasis. The temples, by contrast, were generally run by married men. In January 1976 in Mayapur, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and others presented their idea that no women be allowed to live in ISKCON temples, that their presence creates distractions for those pursuing a renounced way of life. And then it came to the GBC, who supported this proposal. But Srila Prabhupada overturned this decision and in fact instructed that Tamal Krishna Goswami himself be sent away to China. Srila Prabhupada, although he was sympathetic to the concerns of the renunciate brahmacharis and sannyasis, said that it is not desirable nor possible to keep women from coming to join ISKCON, nor would it be possible for them to live separately. His conclusion was that if we simply preach, then all difficulties will be resolved naturally in due course of time. In defense of Tamal Krishna Goswami, it's important to note that in later years, he did become a strong advocate for women and the Grihastha ashram in ISKCON. In fact, we impoverish our ISKCON society when we deprive ourselves of the voices and the gifts of women, or any one sector of society. Some panelists at this conference are asking, does ISKCON really need female gurus? I believe ISKCON needs to correct the mistakes of the past and be enriched by the empathy of mature Vaishnavis being allowed to offer diksha. In a letter to Hansaduta in 1969, Srila Prabhupada wrote, I want that all my spiritual sons and daughters will inherit the title of Bhaktivedanta, so that the family transcendental diploma will continue through the generations. Those possessing the title of Bhaktivedanta will be allowed to initiate disciples. Maybe by 1975, all of my disciples will be allowed to initiate and increase the number of the generations. This is my program. That's the end of that letter. Many men have fallen from the position of guru. Is it possible that Vaishnavis could now be given a chance? At least, could a few senior Vaishnavis be allowed to give diksha to other Vaishnavis? In my personal outreach, my inspiration is to uplift the voices of women who have so often felt unseen and unheard in our ISKCON society. I meet older women, disciples of Srila Prabhupada, or other gurus who have left ISKCON. Often they say they still chant, they still love Srila Prabhupada or Krishna, but that they can't live in an unwelcoming or hostile ISKCON environment where they or their children have been treated poorly, been neglected, suffered abuse by husbands, godbrothers, temple authorities, or teachers. I meet younger women who love kirtan and the path of bhakti, but are suspicious and often want to keep their distance from ISKCON. This is a heartbreaking situation for me. Is this important? Should we care? know that Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya care very much for every living being without any discrimination. Lord Chaitanya instructed Sanatana Goswami, "Hear me, Sanatana, kindness to all living beings, taste for the holy name, and service to the Vaishnavas. Apart from these, there is no other religion." Contrary to this instruction, we see a continued denigration of women in ISKCON, and the GBCs continuing to postpone its earlier decisions to allow qualified Vaishnavis to offer diksha. This denigration is even more prominent in the voices of those who pressure the GBC to renege on their earlier decision. The GBC has repeatedly voted and determined that allowing this resolution to go through aligns with Srila Prabhupada's expressed desires and the precedent set by our Gaudiya acaryas. The generous compromise suggesting cultural sensitivity, allowing India, Hungary, and any other regions to opt out is still on the GBC books as a resolution. Some people ask, why is the GBC allowing itself to be bullied into continual mistreatment and disregard for ISKCON's Vaishnavis? I have a friend who works in the global corporate world. She said that in her experience, when an organization succumbs to bullying, the outcome has never been good. While some voices in ISKCON seem less concerned about being relevant to the societies in which we live, we have seen that each generation of our Gaudiya acaryas has made their teachings relevant for those who hear in each successive generation. It behooves us to try to follow them, sharing these excellent teachings appropriately in the context of time, place, and audience. I close with again referencing Srila Prabhupada's words written in 1936 in glorification of his Guru Maharaj at his Vyas Puja. "The oldest of all, but in a new dress, miracle done, your divine grace."